Hello guys, I'm Jeremy Jenkin, and today I'll talk about my trip cycling through Tibet. So this is over 10 years ago, so it's a while ago, but I'm sure most of the things are basically pretty similar. Good news is I'm sure the roads are much better. Back then about a third of the roads were pretty beat up, or like a washboard, this kind of like wavy kind of thing, so it was really bad in that way. But the bad news is I don't think, at least from the research and stuff I know, it doesn't seem like you can do that solo. It's never been the case that you could cycle Tibet solo. But at least at that time we were able to sneak through. I'll go into that more in a minute. But now I think the checkpoints will reject you, as far as I know. The basic requirement is that you do need a local guide for that. So that's, obviously much more expensive. They probably have to have a support vehicle and things. Just this year, I did see that from Lhasa to Kathmandu, that is open to foreigners now. So at least that section shouldn't be a problem. It's just getting to Lhasa in the eastern part of Tibet that would be a problem. But I'll give some updates on that later. So anyway, from Yunnan province, from Shangri-La to Kathmandu is about 2,500 kilometers. So it was almost 6 weeks it took. And the way we got in was we got to where the border of Yunnan is. And I had met a couple of Spanish guys from Barcelona. And we had come at night, and we actually had even seen a couple of French people on the side of the road that were camping. And we had convinced them to go. I think they probably regretted it afterwards. And so, so we went up. And this road was all under construction. So it was just really dangerous because like on the side there's a huge cliff. You could just hear the water below, and the road itself was like these big, like softball size rocks. So I had the clipless pedals, and I even remember slipping and falling a couple times.
Let's just hope that our next stop is in Tibet and not a Chinese prison, right? Nah. If anything, we'll get fined and sent back.
There is not much risk.
Nah, I'm sure it's alright.
The worst that we've read, it was people who got fined.
Yeah. No, at this hour, it won't be a big deal. The guy will be asleep anyway.
So we got up to that checkpoint. I don't know what it was, like midnight or something, and everyone was asleep. There was no one there. So we got through that town, the border town. But the problem is this, if you do these kinds of trips, is that if you're in a canyon, there's nowhere to camp, right? Because, on one side of the road, it's a wall, and the other side goes down to water or something like that. So we were hoping we'd get to a spot, and we just kept going and going and going. And, I mean, it was like daylight, it was morning. And I guess the French couple, I never saw them again. I think they just, like, camped in the road. I'm not sure what the Spanish guys did that night. But I had seen, like, a construction headquarters, and I ended up... Luckily, I knew some Chinese since I had lived in Kunming a year and a half, and I asked them, if I could like pass out, and the guy showed me a room, and I was able to pass out, which was pretty cool. And then so I mean after that, there's like police and different checkpoints and stuff, but no one ever stopped us. So once you're in, at least at that time back in the day, they assumed you had your paperwork, so they wouldn't check. The only problem is that almost any hotels you go to won't take you. So the government forbid anyone to do that. And about halfway into the trip, one evening, I left a restaurant, had a few drinks and eating. We were going back to our hotel, and I saw a cow eating the trash and stuff. And I just thought it was funny. I took a photo, and a cop saw the flash or something. So they, I don't remember if they came right to our hotel or right up to us on the spot, but they took our passports, and the next day we had to go to the police station, some really young guys. And it was kind of funny because the guy was young, in his like mid-20s, and he knew some English, obviously, it wasn't too bad. And he's like, "Welcome to Tibet. And, I really love the Barcelona football team," because the four people I was with were from the Barcelona area. And so for a couple minutes he's saying all this nice stuff about welcome to Tibet. He's like, "But I have to give you a fine." So it's kind of funny. I think it was about 500 renminbi, and so which is about $80 or something. And so we said we didn't. It was too much. We didn't have that much money, which at the time, I think of it now, it's really not that much, I guess. It could be much worse. You know, I've read things over the years, like of people at different times that like, you know, like in the 80s, some people like they just took all your stuff and your camera and sent you directly out of like China or whatever, or at least out of Tibet somewhere else. So it could vary. So we were actually pretty lucky, and we negotiated. I think we only paid 200 RMB, and then he also gave us like a permit, or at least the receipt, so we couldn't get another ticket. And at that point, we were already about 200 kilometers to Lhasa, so you know it wasn't a big deal. Anyway, and then after that to Kathmandu, there's less security even back then. So we're pretty lucky. So I won't go into like what happened to me every single day chronologically. I'll just go over the main topics, like, you know, the food culture, the people, you know, mechanics with the bike, what to expect, weather, stuff like that. So the first thing is, you know, the visa issue, right? So you're going to need a Chinese visa. That was a problem for me because I had a 1-month visa, and by the time I got up through Yunnan province to the border of Tibet, I needed to renew it again, which would mean I'd probably only have 30 days. So, you know, if you only have a month or two, that might be too short. So make sure you have all your visa stuff straightened out. Otherwise, you could have some problems. So most people go into Tibet through either Yunnan or Sichuan province. So I came up through Yunnan. I came up through Dali to Lijian, Tiger Leaping Gorge, Shangri-La, Duchin, and up into Tibet. I think that's the G214. Or people come through Sichuan is the other popular way on G318. And I go out on that road all the time because I live in Chengdu, and you see, you know, hundreds of Chinese cyclists every year head out that way. That seems to be pretty popular too. Both those roads connect when you get into Tibet. And then that southern road, there's like 2 main roads to Lhasa. The southern one's more direct, and that's the way most people go. So I think the best time of year would probably be August. The rainy season's like May, June, July into August. I've been usually pretty lucky on my trips at the end of July or August. I did mine in September, which is fine. But you know, as you get into October, it could be pretty cold. I mean, there's, you know, you're averaging about 4,000 meters, which is like 13,000 feet. So the weather could change up there pretty quick. I remember sitting down, like hanging out, either having lunch or taking a break, and you know, like an hour later, we were hit with snow. So you know, getting up at the top of the pass, if a storm hits, you could get you know, slammed with snow or hail or rain or something like that.
Well, we were eating about a half hour ago and everything was nice. Then a storm came and we tried going. We made it about a half a kilometer, and first there was some sleet and some hard hail, but we decided we weren't going to go up the next 14 kilometers in this. Just too dangerous. But we do have a couple friends a couple kilometers ahead, so I hope they're alright and found some shelter.
So I'd say, you know, mid-August is probably the best time. You could go in spring too, but you know, you could get hit with some rain and there could be some landslides and different things, so you obviously don't want that. Obviously there's tons of huge climbs. I don't know exactly how many passes you go over, but you know, you're looking at a bunch of like 40-kilometer climbs. And so if you're not in great shape, you're going to be pushing the bike uphill for a while. So you have to time that well. I remember doing quite a lot of passes in the evening. So I get up towards the top. Of course, didn't want to stay there. I did have a tent, but it's super cold and not super comfortable. So I'd head down. You know, it's good to have a good headlamp on your bike that's really bright. So you could try to get down because it obviously is cold up there and not super comfortable. As far as accommodation and stuff, you know, obviously bring a tent, so you have the ability to camp wherever you'd like. And especially if you're doing it technically illegally, you know, that's a better option because none of the hotels will take you pretty much. I mean, one of the biggest issues we had is that there weren't really any hotels that would take us. We'd have to go all throughout town to find one, and it would take a long time. But like I said, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's even possible these days to go in without a guide. I was just looking online. I think you probably got to spend $50 a day and have a guy come with you, unfortunately. So I'm not sure if those people will camp with you and very flexible or not, but just put that, just think of that aspect. Most of the hotels are probably, probably $20. I mean, you could get stuff a little cheaper, some of the guest houses, and then it'll go up from there. Other things like cost, it's usually a little bit more than like Eastern China. I noticed when I was into Tibet, I was thinking, oh, it'd be really cheap because it's poor, but that's not how economics work. It's, it's a difficult place to get into, so they're shipping everything in. And so the prices were like 20-30% more for like meals and different things. Now that probably, it's a little easier to get there now because they've got better roads, so it might be cheaper. But in general, if an area is difficult to get to, you'll pay a little bit more for food and stuff. Overall, it's still cheap, but that's just something to consider. Dangers and things. They have these big mastiff dogs everywhere, and actually a lot of stray dogs in general. Like you get in these towns. I've even read in the news in China, a lot of areas, the stray dogs get out of control and they actually end up putting them all to sleep and stuff or whatever. And so you do have these massive dogs in the countryside and stuff that'll occasionally chase you or whatever. And this is just general advice for dogs, is that if you're biking, just get off the bike and walk. And as scared as you may be and as crazy as that sounds, the dog actually loses its interest, which it seems random, but it's true. The dog just basically stopped. I remember a couple of Belgian girls telling me that a long time ago, and I did that, and I was like, oh wow, that's weird. But there's something with the wheels turning that really gets them worked up or whatever. So just get off your bike in that case. Other dangers, of course, elevation. I didn't really notice it at the time. I know when I was at the base camp area, you could go up to that monastery there, and I think it was at like 5,000 meters, 5,100 meters. It was hard to sleep, and I had a headache. So I did know what elevation sickness was then, like the basic aspects of that. I've since been up in the Tibetan areas in Sichuan, which, I'm over 4,000 meters a lot, and I didn't feel good. Kind of like I didn't want to eat, had a hard time sleeping, headache, all of this kind of stuff. So, there's some medication you could get for that. I got some Chinese one. I forget the name of it. There's a popular one that you could get like in Western countries. I forget the name offhand, but I would get something, even if you don't really have that much sickness, it just makes it more comfortable. Altitude sickness is, it's just not a good feeling. I did trip last month with a few people. We were over 4,000 meters, and everyone's like, oh, I don't want to drink. I don't want to eat. And so it's not the end of the world, like, you can still be okay, but if you could get the medicine, I definitely recommend it. And of course, yeah, it can be really bad. If you haven't been up that high before, I'd take your time getting up there. Because I know, like, even leaving from Chengdu, you get up pretty quick. It's only a couple hundred, 200-300 kilometers from Chengdu, and you're already up at a pass that's like 4,200 meters. And same thing in Yunnan. If you're coming from like Dali or somewhere, it's lower and it's gradual, so that's good. But if you start at like Shangri-La, you're already at like 3,000 something. So just make sure that you're okay as far as altitude sickness goes, because every year people die coming out here doing hikes and different things. Young or old, it can affect anyone, so that's something to be careful of. And of course, landslides and stuff are another huge thing out here. All the time, there's roads getting washed out. And that's something that could disrupt your journey too, because you could be going and everything's going fine. It's like, the bridge is gone or something like that. That happens all the time in Tibetan areas or Sichuan, Yunnan, anywhere where, the rainy season comes in and stuff gets blocked. I remember when I came out to do a Sichuan trip here like 10 years ago, I went to the bus station. It's like, can I go here? They're like, no, you can't go there. Then I had to keep going back because it was like, I needed to find when like the bridge was going to get rebuilt or the route was going to be open. So if you're doing stuff in the rainy season, like in the summer, that could be a big issue. So that's something to consider.